And that's for me, for different reasons. Some people just don't want to bother to look into the history because you're talking about not just 1948, you're talking about before 1948. So that's a lot of work to be done. So we'll try to really kind of like give a quick summary, right? So, and one of the things that people say, well, Palestine is not even a country, right? And I'm like, well, the simplest thing is like you wouldn't call somebody Palestinian if they didn't have a land called Palestine, right?
That's good.
And Palestine goes, back. I mean, you're talking about thousands of years. But let's for the simplicity and for the sake of time, talk about Palestine pre-1948. And I always tell people, just just go a little bit into the internet. We browse, and search a lot of things. Look at the pictures of people coming to Palestine, Jews from around, Europe, who actually been rejected to, like, for instance, they came to the States. I don't know if a lot of people know about this or not. They were rejected. They were not allowed to come to the United States of America.
Right, that's true.
And they told the Palestinians, please don't do the same thing to us that others did to us, meaning accept us. And of course, they were accepted.
Right.
And, Jews have lived in Palestine, right? Christians have been, part of Palestine, not just Muslims, because a lot of people talk this is, talk about this as like a religious conflict. It's like Muslims against Jews. To this day, we have Jews who are actually being oppressed.
Wow.
So now one of the things that I tell people is once you start looking into Palestine pre-1948, you'll start understanding the historical reality of Palestine. Palestine has existed prior to. Palestine will continue to exist. And then you're talking now about 1948, which a lot of people actually start dating, and they call it a conflict. I call it an occupation. You got to name it what it is.
Right.
Conflict, if we don't agree on two things, you have your rights, I have my rights, we have a conflict, right? We have the disagreement. When they come and take over your land, it's an occupation. It is what it is. I'm not going to try to call it, and I would really appreciate if we continue to call it occupation. It's not a conflict, right?
That's good.
So the Zionists, in which I believe, and this is a political movement. It's not just my belief. It's a factual thing. Zionism is a political movement. It's a movement that actually hijacks Judaism. And for me, I always say Zionism is the other side or the other face of the same coin of anti-Semitism. Because anyone who is
you mean like Zionist?
Zionism is anti-Semitic.
Wow.
And I'll tell you why.
Wow.
Because for you to be anti-Semite, Arabs are Semites, by the way, which a lot of people actually don't know about.
Oh, really?
Yes, Arabs are
How's
Semites.
that?
Look into the definition. A Semite, Arabs and Jews are actually Semites.
Oh, wow.
So
I
now
never knew that.
Exactly. So there's nothing anti-Semitic like Zionism, because here's the thing. First of all, they hijacked Judaism, and that's the worst thing you can do.
Right.
And they discriminate against Arabs. But a lot of people think Zionism and Semitism are the same. No, I say Zionism and anti-Semitism are the same, because no one has managed to discriminate against Jews and Arabs together like Zionists.
Wow.
By hijacking Judaism and discriminating against Arabs. And now we're talking from 1948 to this day, 75 years of occupation.
Wow.
And we don't have the time to really dig into that. And I always tell people, go out there and search it. You watch a lot of videos. I can't give the perfect summary, but there are a lot of videos out there that actually give you that summary. Fast forward, a lot of people like to start from October 7th. And I would say, please don't start the movie midway. Right? You have to understand the characters. You have to understand, everything. And then when you see an act, then you put it actually in place. And a lot of people actually, even those who decide to be silent, they're saying, I don't know, therefore I can't say. Well, that's not an excuse. Educate yourself. Learn a little bit about it, because you're talking about people dying. This is not about, do you like coffee or tea? And we could disagree. Right? Or we could keep quiet. Right. This is literally a genocide. So that's a little bit of history onto it.
You think like, can we call it genocide?
It's not can we call it genocide. I mean, scholars, right, call it genocide because it's the book definition of genocide. Ethnic cleansing. And you could look into history. And even some people now are saying what happened in the Holocaust is exactly what's happening now. And some people even took it a step further. They said it's worse now, because in the Holocaust we didn't have a lot of cameras on it, right? It's more of like a lot of people kind of like, you know, later told us more about it and more pictures came out. Right now it's live and we're watching it, that it's happening. And a lot of people are doing nothing about it.
But like, why you think that we should call it genocide? Why? What's
the definition of genocide? What's the definition of ethnic cleansing? Right? I mean, this is a systematic, and here's the thing, one of the things that actually I tell people, which is, it's just mind-blowing, right? In the past, you would say, well, I mean, we are going to judge based on the action. We have statements of you know, Zionist politicians talking about wiping out Gaza, killing everyone there, right? And we're not even talking about what's happening in the West Bank.
And the worst thing that they're just saying in public, they're not even hiding it.
They're not hiding it.
Exactly.
They're proud of, you know, they are bragging about it. They're laughing, right? And one of them, you know, and we're going to talk about the difference between mainstream media and social media, because that's very important for us. And I hope we have a question about that. But if you don't, we can actually allude to it. If you look in the mainstream media, they're literally coming out and saying we cannot go to sleep if we don't watch the destruction, right? It's like I need this. And they're not shy about it, right? So my issue is for people who actually struggle to recognize this as genocide or to see this as ethnic cleansing, right? We don't have a lot of debate when we see that, you know, when we start highlighting the Holocaust, right? We say that was ethnic cleansing, that was genocide. This is even worse than that, right? Even people actually have run numbers of how many kids were killed, you know, back then, and how many kids are actually killed now on the daily basis. We have more kids actually getting killed now.
A lot. Okay, like what is the number right now?
I don't remember exactly the number that they're running, or they ran actually, because this actually was released, you know, I would say about a month ago or a little bit over a month, and it's just amazing how people are looking at these numbers and they recognize the Holocaust, right? But comes to this, they're like, well, you know, I don't know if we can call it genocide. And I'm like, there's an issue with you, not the definition itself, or ethnic cleansing. So, and that's what I tell people, please educate yourself. And also I think some people are too scared to call it what it is, right? Because politically, we're not aligning ourselves with the Western powers, right? Because they're like, well, you know, and one thing is amazing, look at what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. Right?
That's right.
Which is, and again, I am against war, right? And I'm against the invasion and occupation of another land. But it just, again, it goes to tell you about the double standard that we have. And dare I say, even within our own community, right? Because politically it doesn't sound right to call this a genocide. Yet, we don't think twice before talking about what's happening in Ukraine, and we're saying, you know, a lot of war crimes are being committed because our government says so, right? And this is one of the things I tell people, listen, be loyal to the agenda, not to the people, right? As you know, born U.S. citizen here, I always say my loyalty is not to the government, it's to the country. And part of my loyalty to the country is actually to oppose my government when they're not on the right path of history or the right side of history, right? And we have to learn that. That's part of citizenship. Right? But a lot of us actually don't understand that. We feel it's a blind loyalty to the government. So whatever our president says or our elected officials say, we have to line ourselves up with them. And anything against that, then you're betraying your country. I'm like, no. You know, these officials were elected by us. They work for us, right?
That's true.
And when we see something right, we have to say so, and we see it wrong. When they actually go against us, that's when we try to bring them back to where they should belong to, right? And that's something I think that people really need to take back. Right.
The next one, and this is really a topic. The most strongest people, the most powerful countries around the globe, they got together and fighting Palestinian. Do you think there is hope for Palestinian?
That's a good question. So let me actually kind of like this is a multi-fold and multi-layers question, but I'm going to try to hopefully break it down. So first of all, it's the government's, not the people.
Right.
Because also you're talking about the people of the most powerful countries are against the genocide. This is very key because, and it's very crucial, right? Because we could talk about South Africa and you know, apartheid, you know, what happened in South Africa as an apartheid, you know, country or government back in the days. One of the things that people get confused with is like they say the government and the people are the same. They're not.
They're not. That's
They're
right.
not. They're not. So that's something I say. The government doesn't always represent the people. Should, right? The elected officials should represent their own people, but unfortunately they don't. But the people are coming out in the numbers, right? And I'm talking about the people as in the people with different backgrounds. And this is something I really want to highlight. Here, locally in Albany, I see it across the state and even across the country. And let's be honest, the United States is the leading country, right? Or the leading government, should I say, that is actually not just supporting, but actually enabling this entire genocide, right? As a government. But I tell you, I am standing shoulder to shoulder and holding hand to hand with Jews, Christians, people of different backgrounds who are actually against the genocide. And this is something I really want to highlight. This is not a religious war. This is a geopolitical war that our government is involved in, and we are too deep into it, right? But when you look at the people of these powerful countries, they're against it. And we're actually feeling this during the primaries, right?
Okay, like, what do you mean that the most powerful countries against that?
So again, I want to
the people or the government.
So I want to separate. That's why I said country, because country has the people and then we have the government, right? So the people is just me and you, right? People are taking it to the streets, right? People are actually going to vote. People are actually trying to engage our you know, I always call them public servants because I think we deal with our politicians as celebrities, right? It's like when I take pictures, I'm like, they work for us, right? And we have to keep that in mind. So the people, right? And this is something, by the way, that even our government is so annoyed with the fact that we have Jews actually are the loudest ones, right? Coming out, you know, Jewish Voice for Peace, you know, not in our names. And we have a lot of Jewish organizations coming out against the genocide, right? And again, and for me, this is where you're saying, is there hope? There is hope. To be honest, Palestine gave us hope. You know, for me, I would turn it around. I wouldn't say, is there hope for Palestine? There has always been hope for Palestine, right? But I think Palestine has given us hope. If you look at it, we have been awakened. The people of the world, we have been awakened. We have been hibernating for the longest time.
Right. Yeah, like someone said that this is the first time when you see all the people got together. Muslim, not Muslim, got together and fighting. For one, exactly. And that's a human right. This is the first time. This is I wouldn't say the first time in a sense that it's the first time, but this is the most powerful time that actually we're there in number, we're organized, you know, as independent entities and also collectively. This is the one thing that really, and I always say Palestine has awakened us. Palestine has given us hope because they're resilient. You know, they're there. They have been going through this for 75 years. Yes, we turned a blind eye and we try to ignore it because it does take us out of our comfort zone. But again, so when you talk about the most powerful, I would say be careful when using that term because the most powerful is the people at the end of the day. Yes, it's going to take us time before actually our government reflects our own, you know, stand. And yes, it's going to take time because we've been sleeping, right? And our elected officials have taken advantage of that, right? So we have to take that responsibility and take over the government by electing those who actually are fit in office, those who actually reflect our own opinions. And you see like what happened in Michigan with the uncommitted votes. You know, Biden is freaking out. Biden is on a panic mode. And everybody knows that, right? They don't talk about it, but let's be honest, behind closed doors, they're panicking and they know this is happening because of Palestine. But I will conclude with this question with one thing, and again, it's multifold, but just for the sake of time, remember one thing. For us as Muslims, we have to believe in the power of God. And this is one thing that I tell people, because people do ask me this question. They're like, okay, we've been protesting, we've been organizing and all that, but we're not seeing an end to this, right? It's like you wake up the next morning and you're hoping there's this announcement of permanent ceasefire. And I tell them, don't worry about the result. Right? Because the most powerful is above all of us, and that's God, right? So don't take things and say, I want to see it tomorrow, I want to see it the day after tomorrow. That's you deciding how the end result is going to be, and that's not within our power. That's within the power of God. One thing that is within our power is what can we do, right? Individually and collectively. And I actually used this during an event that actually we had at the masjid. And I told people this. I said, you know, we're thinking about Ramadan coming up, right? In about a week or less. And of course, I had to
kind of, bring Palestine into the mix. And we have what we call Laylatul Qadr, the night of power. And I said, listen, right now we feel like we're in darkness, right? Everything is just not working out. We're trying everything that we could possibly do. Some of us, not all of us. But we're not seeing the end of that tunnel. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. And I told him, I said, listen, the night of the power, it's called the night of the power, right? But that's where light came through, right? But that light came from the darkest point on earth, in a cave. Wow. I mean, think about a cave. We have light right now, right? But a cave is dark. It's dark. Who dares to go into a dark place at night, right? You don't dare to do that. That's where the revelation came through to the Prophet ﷺ. So don't worry about that, right? If we were to assess the first, or if we were to predict the first day that the Prophet ﷺ would receive the revelation, probably think of like an open area, everybody surrounding him so he can get the support, because he was, he was shook to his core. But no, it came in a time he was by himself, right? Nobody was around him. It was dark because it was night, and that's where the light came through. So Palestine will be free, but not under my terms or your terms, under God's terms. It will happen. And history tells us this, right? Umar radiallahu anhu, he freed Palestine, right? And the way that it happened in an amazing way. It was a liberation of the Jews too, as well, by the way. If people really are interested in looking into that, the Jews were actually kicked out of Palestine, right? When the Christians took over. Umar radiallahu anhu, he asked, he's like, where are the Jews? I'm not seeing any Jews here. They said, well, we kicked them out, right? And we didn't feel that they belonged, and we kicked them out. He said, no, we have to bring them back. This is their land, just like it is our land. So actually, they were re-established in Palestine because of Umar radiallahu anhu, who was a Khalifa, right? So you look at it and you're like, if somebody was to actually try to predict that, nobody would have predicted that Palestine would have been free back then, right? And he was. Salah ad-Din did the same thing, right? He freed Palestine, and he made sure that Muslims, Jews, Christians would live together, right? Wow. And that's exactly, if you look at the history, no one re-established the Christians and the Jews like the Muslims did in that land. So it's not a religious war, right? It's not a holy war as some people like to say, oh, it's the Muslims against the Jews. It's never the Muslims against the Jews.
So many people right now think that it's Muslim versus not Muslim. This is like how so many people look into that. And that's why so many people right now, they're against Palestine because, oh, Palestinians are Muslim, then I'm against Islam. I have to go against, I don't support Palestine. That's how so many people look into it.
And again, so for me, it's like they have no excuse. It's just pure ignorance combined with arrogance, because that's the worst combination, right? Again, just look into history. I always tell people, don't take my word for it, right? Have all the doubts about everything that I'm saying. Go and look it up. Go and search it up. Till this day, we have Jews in Palestine being prosecuted by the Zionists. And I'm choosing my words carefully here, being prosecuted by the Zionists because these Jews, they believe that they still live in Palestine, not Israel. True. Till this day. And we have actually videos of them being beaten up by the settlers, being beaten up by the soldiers of the Zionist entity. Because, and here's the thing, they're standing their ground. By the way, these same Jews, all they have to do is just recognize the occupying entity, and they would be given so many privileges that they could only dream of. But they're standing their ground, and they're saying, as Jews, it's actually against our belief for us to take somebody else's land. This is the core. This is like part of the belief of the Jews, who are really true to their book. And they say Zionists are actually the worst enemies to the Jews, right? And in these same people, they go back, right, and talk about the history of when they were babysitting each other's kids with Muslims and Christians. Literally, like they would leave their kids with the Muslims as they go to worship. The Muslims, or whatever they have to do, Muslims would do the same thing, right? And originally I'm from Algeria. I grew up there, even though I was born here. But for me, I can relate. Right, I can relate because literally our parents will open the door and say, "Go play," right? And then the neighbors' kids would literally come in. That's fine. We would go into our friends' houses. That's the relationship that actually they had: Muslims, Jews, and Christians who lived in Palestine. But the situation now is different. And these same Jews, they are considering themselves true Palestinians, that land is theirs as Palestinian citizens.
Right.
Christians feel the same thing. This is our land as Palestinian Christians. And of course, the Muslims as well. So I always